Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Welcome to the webinar on Inspection Readiness. Is your company ready? At the moment, it seems that not all participants have arrived, so let us wait a couple of minutes to allow everyone to join. Thank you. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar on Inspection Readiness. Is your company ready? My name is Stefania Sarga, and I represent Arithmos, the organizer of this webinar. Before starting, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. Next slide, please. Please be advised that all participants are muted. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenters by typing your questions into the toolbar. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation, and we will collect the questions and address them during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Today's webinar is being recorded, and you will receive a follow-up email with a link to view the recording. You can also download Arithmos and Agatha corporate fact sheets in the webinar panel on the right. Next, please. A couple of words about Arithmos before starting. Part of PM Holding, a group of companies operating within the life science sector. At Arithmos, we provide business and technology consultancy services for e-clinical, reporting and analytics, regulated document management, cloud migration, pharmacovigilance and safety. Thanks to our expertise and to our holistic approach, driven by our knowledge of clinical development and regulatory, we support your digital transformation, business process reengineering, system integration, and data-driven management. Next, please. We integrate solutions and technologies for life science companies. Agatha is one of our partners since 2019 for clinical eTMF, remote monitoring, quality management, standard operating procedures, and regulatory management solutions. And with that, we will open today's webinar. Next, please. We are very pleased to have with us today Antonello Cervone, Ken Loney, and Robert Bakanovic. Antonello got a master in computer science from the University of Rome La Sapienza. He has spent over 30 years in information technology and 20 years in the specific pharmaceutical research and development domain. During his experience, he had the opportunity to see both sides of the research and development process, from a sponsor and vendors provider point of view, from working with CROs, pharma, biotech, hospital, and most recently with Arithmos as a senior business and technical consultant. He has a strong experience in computer system validation. Ken has a long career at the intersection of software and life sciences, and he has helped hundreds of pharma, biotech, and medical device companies with technology, strategy, and implementation. He's a big believer in the power of software to transform businesses. A graduate of Colgate University with a master's in the management of technology, Ken deconstructs technical Bible, helping his audiences and readers get to the heart of how software can solve their problems. Robert is a system implementation expert focused on life science content management solutions for the last 12 years. He has a particular expertise in requirements analysis, project management, and services delivery. I wrap up my introduction and I welcome Antonello, who will start the webinar. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. That's our agenda that I'm going to introduce. We divided this agenda in basically three different topics. The first is an introduction to the inspection readiness, let's say, definition and scenario. Second part will be the introduction of a technology that could support the effective inspection readiness. And in the third part, we will have a hands-on demonstration of a solution from Agatha. Of course, at the end of the webinar, we will keep a space for questions, answers. So we will try to, let's say, to keep this webinar as more interactive as possible, as much as possible interactive. And want to really understand also your concern, your questions, and if we can, of course, reply to your questions. Okay, so let's start with this big word, inspection readiness. What does it mean? So I believe that everybody agrees that a pharmaceutical company should ensure a quality system operating at very high standard and on a daily basis. So pharmaceutical companies can be inspected regularly. This was, if you want, the past, but also in a very unannounced way by the national or international health authorities. This means that the pharmaceutical companies must ensure that they are always ready and prepared to welcome inspectors and allow them to go through the inspection at any time. So the inspection readiness, at the end of the day, is a process of preparing for an inspection by a regulatory authority, which is conducting an official review of documentation, facilities, records, and any other resources that are required impacting the GCP path, and can be, of course, inspected by the regulatory authority. So we underline this fact that based on what we can see here, that probably is evident, okay, but at the end of the day, it's not the case, because every time we receive an inspection, I'm talking as a pharmaceutical company, I'm talking about from a pharmaceutical company point of view, and we always have some surprise. We have elements to prove that we are in the good ship, but at the end of the day, something of wrong is always behind the corner. So we need to really change ultimately from a reactive approach to a proactive approach. We don't have to wait to get the findings to wait the last 10 minutes to work. We have to be proactive. So, is important the inspection readiness? Well, I would say that we should see ask us the opposite question. So, what are the consequences of non-staying inspection ready? Okay, so not maintaining an inspection ready TMF is really risky. Probably, I would say that the TMF is one of the key factor of an inspection, because the TMF tells the history of your trial. But however, we will talk about this later. So the TMF not ready is risk. Is a risk, become a risk, and it has as consequence even an unfavorable inspection finding, with some consequence very important that could also bring to an hold of the study. This kind of consequence mean that resource must be allocated to fix these for before the audit, the inspection arrives to the company. So we have really to change, to introduce a shift in philosophy from reactionary to preparatory place, to preparatory plan, to preparatory work, because this is crucial in avoiding the rework. And absolutely, this could represent a benefit for the study stakeholders in a global. So it's required by regulation. That's the other question. No? So it's absolutely yes. I mean, in the past, the inspection readiness required spending a long time for to be ready, but today the planned audit becomes more and more rare. Inspection readiness basically introduce this concept that an organization should be always ready for an audit. And the health authorities, ICH, but also FDA, EMA, they started to put this sentence in their guidelines. So they don't want that in the last minute the company rush, because they realize that this is not useful for the study and then also for the patient safety. Okay, so this means that inspection readiness is becoming a regulatory requirement now. That means that every day an organization must keep any study document, data, and procedure in a good state, in a state of readiness for an external auditor to access them and conduct inspection. Well, eTMF is important for inspection readiness. We have many guidelines. We talk about Europe. We are not talking about USA, but the TMF is crucial. I mean, the TMF contains the entire current and prior story of an audit trail or an audit trail of the clinical trial or the investigation. This is clearly referred in the guidelines. So we have to ensure an effective control, ongoing control process of any trial documentation. So to do that, you don't have any alternative. You need something of centralized. So you need a centralized repository. Okay. So the importance of the TMF is establishing, allowing the owner of the TMF to get some real-time metrics on the filed documents And in these metrics, get a sort of health KPI, health index, no, about the status of the inspection readiness status of the TMF. So this is possible if you have in place a computerized system, eTMF, allowing a remote access to study documentation from any place at any time. This is for you, but of course, this is also a requirement in case of inspection for the inspectors, and integrating an effective security features to ensure the full documents traceability, because this is absolutely requested by the guideline from EMEA, but from FDA, from everybody. So any document stored in the TMF must provide the full history of this document since the beginning. Okay, so that's a part of the concept of inspection readiness, but the TMF is important for many other factors. Is important for having a structured model. I think that all of you knows more or less the DA model, the organization of our documents. So I mean, the main convention that is applied to a document. All this stuff are very, very difficult to be managed manually. So the very first step, the very basic step for an eTMF, for inspection readiness, for an eTMF inspection readiness, is to work and to work with an eTMF for sure. So I will let absolutely Ken to go more into the deep and see what is the unique value, the added value, the benefits of introducing an eTMF within your organization. Ken, please.
Thank you so much, Antonello. It's very, very nice to be connected. It's nice to be in Rome for a day, even though I'm actually in New Hampshire in the United States. But I feel like I'm in Rome just listening to you speak. Also, thank you to everyone listening to allow me to speak in English. I wish I had your language. I would rather listen to Antonello speak in Italian. It would be even prettier. So thank you. Before I talk to this slide, I want to overlap with Antonello a little about inspection readiness and a computerized system, a TMF or eTMF. The example I use all the time when people say, but do you really need a computer system to do this? Can't you maintain inspection readiness by being careful with your physical files, your emails, etc.? And the answer is, I think so. It's an idea, maybe. But I always use the example, because I have children, of a teenager's bedroom. So I hope this crosses our cultures very well. Obviously, Italian people have children too, and you have teenagers sometimes. And probably some of those teenagers are boys. So I want you to picture a boy's bedroom, a teenager's bedroom. And you, the parent probably, have decorated it very nicely. And on one day after it was decorated, it was just like a picture, just like a catalog. It was perfecto. But then the teenager lives in it, and the teenager has friends over. And if it's like my teenager, despite the rules, sometimes they eat pizza in their bedroom, and they have their clothes. And soon the bedroom is a terrible mess, very soon. So what if there was inspection readiness for this bedroom? How would you do this? There are only two choices. One is the traditional approach. Grandma is coming, you must clean your room. Grandma is coming on Saturday, you must clean your room. So you beg, and then you take a lot of time, and then you help, and it's 3 days of picking up pizza and cleaning clothes and hanging clothes and making it look like the picture again. But what if you had instead a robot? What if we had a modern future robot that just sat in the child's room. And every time a piece of clothing was dropped on the floor, it picked it up and hung it up. And every time a pizza crust appeared, the pizza crust was disposed of. And every time the bed was slept in, the bed was made again. Think of an eTMF like that robot. An eTMF is keeping things clean all the time. So it's always inspection ready. Grandma can always come. In this case, grandma is European medicine, EMA. But that is the idea. Yes, you might have a perfect teenage boy. He might keep it perfectly clean all the time. I do not know this boy, but maybe you know this boy. But instead, eTMF is a robot, and it just keeps track of everything. It keeps picking up, putting things in the right place, and keeping track of everything that was ever done. So this is my example. And again, I hope that makes sense in Italy as much as it does in the United States. What do you think, Antonello? Just shake your head. It's okay?
Of course, I have two children, and I know this history very well. So your example, I think, perfectly fit this scenario. Absolutely.
I said teenage boys. I could have said my own bedroom, but that would be embarrassing. Okay. Yeah. So let's talk about an eTMF. I want to talk about the history a little bit. On this slide, you see a timeline, and the purpose is to show how things evolved. As you can see from my gray hair, I've been here through this entire history, watching computerized systems work with clinical trials. And if we go back 30 years into the 1990s, we had our first appearance of computerized systems for managing trial master file. I call it the age of Documentum and open text, if you happen to know those technologies. Very large platform technologies for building these solutions on. It was the first time we had document management systems, but they were very expensive, large platforms used by only the biggest pharma, because we were talking in US dollars of millions of dollars, certainly millions of euros to do these systems. It did evolve in the early 2000s. Many companies came out with a modular model for trial master file and managing other things in clinical trials, many times built on a platform like SharePoint. So there was less building and more pre-packaging. Things got better. And then in 2007, Viva was launched. Many of you know Viva. And Viva brought this all to the cloud. So things got better again. They got easier for IT because you didn't need on-premise solutions and you didn't need to spend so much time configuring or customizing your own solution on this platform. So things got better and better, but they didn't get good enough. What we call a fourth generation eTMF is where we need to be. Yes, it's cloud-based like Viva, but we need to move from platforms to applications. And what's the difference? Applications are much closer to ready to use, and they're less expensive, and they're faster for users to use. So three things: less expensive, faster to implement within weeks, you're in production, and easier for users. And that's what a fourth generation is. So that is a history of eTMF, and it has to do with inspection readiness. Because now we have applications easy to implement, ready to use at a much lower price point and available to smaller and mid-sized companies, not just the biggest companies. Antonello, would you switch the slide, please?
Yeah, sure.
You'll see I'll say thank you, but I mixed my languages. So what came to mind was merci, sorry. So very fast on these slides. There's another way to look at the history and the way of thinking of a TMF. The first image in one's mind for a trial master file is file cabinet. It is the documents, the files, the things. And even some of the language in the regulation says this. The TMF is the set of documents that allows you to recreate the science. It's the lab notes for the entire experiment that is a clinical trial across all sites and with all data. So that's what a TMF is. It's the central filing cabinet, includes everything. Whether a CRO did it or a sponsor did it themselves, it doesn't matter. It's all the content. So that's a simple model, and it still works. But if we go to the next slide, Antonello, we'll see we progressed from this. The TMF and eTMF is not simple storage. It's also a process hub. And by this, I mean that things happen during a clinical trial. Things are not just collected and stored. Things happen. Results are obtained. Documents are reviewed and approved. There's workflow process of step by step by step. And a modern eTMF is a process hub controlling all those steps. Now, this has a lot to do with inspection readiness because each step is documented in an eTMF. Not just here's the document, but here's the 10 versions of the document from draft to review to final with the electronic signatures. So as the TMF became a process hub, it became more important that an eTMF is in place because it documents all those steps automatically. It's keeping track of everything happening. And if it's done well, everything happening with every stakeholder, the sponsor, the CRO, and even the sites. And yet it goes further. So on the next slide, you'll see the trial master file actually is more than a process hub, it's a collaboration hub. And I hope the English works, but from simply automating steps, we're now interacting with each other. The sponsor, the CRO, and even the site can communicate and execute tasks in collaboration, such as remote monitoring or monitoring at the clinical site can be done through the eTMF environment. The coordination and the communication between the stakeholders can be captured in the trial master file environment. So you can see how much things change from a simple view of file cabinet to an entire ecology with multiple stakeholders, multiple processes, multiple communications. It's dramatically different. And the good news is, with an eTMF, all this can happen while the robot is doing its thing. The robot is watching, keeping track of who did what, when they did it, what the change to the document was, and it's all documented and ready for inspection. So on the next slide, I try to bring this all together. And we go beyond a collaboration hub. And what is the vision for a modern eTMF? To me, a modern eTMF is a platform for a digital decentralized trial. So we hear about decentralized trials as opposed to centralized trials. And again, the question is, how do you do that? And an electronic trial master file is essential in this ecology, in this ecosystem. We have multiple players. On the bottom left, you see the sponsor is connected, and the sponsor is able to track activities, not just look at documents, is able to participate in workflows, reviewing things, approving things, completing quality assurance, monitoring. If a CRO is involved, they're connected. They're keeping track of documents. Their CRAs are updating documents, but they're also looking at site documents because on the right, you see the sites are connected too. The sites are uploading documents to an electronic workspace, and the CRO or the sponsor is doing monitoring and moving those documents into the TMF. So you see all 3 points of the collaboration, the sponsor, the CROs and service companies, the sites are all connected to this electronic workspace. And that's what a modern eTMF is. So I'll finish by phrasing it this way. Do you need an eTMF to store TMF documents? No. Do you need an eTMF to be inspection ready with a system that connects all the stakeholders, automates things, and keeps track of it all so that it's inspection ready? And I think the answer is yes.
No. And Ken, let me also add that even at the sponsor level, you cannot see a monolithic, one single actor only. So even at sponsor level, you have different players, different departments that are involved in the TMF effort.
It's a very good point. My diagram makes it look very clean and very simple. I have 3 types of stakeholders, but of course, Antonello is saying there's multiple stakeholders in the sponsor space. There could be many service providers in the CRO space. And these sites might not be all lined up like that. Some might be in the United States, Europe, Africa, Asia. It's a complicated world of a big modern trial. But this is a way to, it looks complex, but you're actually taking complexity away from the way it would be otherwise. Let us move on. And what I now want to do is reuse some work I did a year ago. Oh, I'm sorry, I had a pretty picture first. My memory is not so good. So the EMA is the bad guy looking in the window. If you're from the EMA and listening in, I apologize. You're not really a bad guy, but you are the inspector. And the pharma industry that sponsors the CROs are the scared person saying, who's going to look in my window? And the only way to make this comfortable, because you don't know when they'll show up, is to be inspection ready at all times. I suppose it's a little improper to say, but you always want to have nice pajamas on. Let us say that, in case someone looks through your window. And in the States, of course, it's the FDA. But the key is that an eTMF allows you to make sure you're not missing anything that should be in the TMF, that there's no duplicate, that errors in documents, failures for approvals are all remedied, and it's up to date and ready for the EMA. I should have another picture, Antonello, that isn't dark and scary. It's a happy inspector, and there's no scary under the sheet. Let me finish with this next slide and going through it. And my purpose here is to reuse some work I did a few years ago. I created a document called the Essential Guide to a Fourth Generation eTMF. And this was my thinking about what is this new class of eTMFs compared, or eTMF systems, compared to the ones we had in those 3 generations. What makes it different? And I documented that in this ebook. It is available if you have your camera and you take a picture of that QR code. You should have a link to download that item. If you don't, please use the questions and answers to let us know. But that is a QR code to get the Essential Guide to a Fourth Generation eTMF. Now let me talk about the content, these 10 items. I will go quite quickly, but in your questions, please feel free to ask me more. To be a fourth generation eTMF, I think it, of course, must be cloud-based, not on-premise. It must be based on the reference model. So more than 10 years ago, the DIA and others published the reference model, which allows you to see what should be in a TMF. Now, that's tricky to say. The DIA reference model is the superset, the big universe of everything that could be in a TMF. It doesn't mean that's right for you, but it still is a good place to start. It should be pre-populated. An eTMF should start with, here are the documents expected, not just a blank space, but instead you're replacing content, so you know what's still missing, which is the fourth item. It needs to be much closer to ready to use. To be an application and not a platform, we should be talking about a matter of weeks to be in production, not a matter of months. So very close to ready to use and very easy to use in a modern way, because of course, we say in English, mixing my metaphor, but you could give the teenager a vacuum cleaner to clean their room. But if it's not easy to use, they won't do it. So we need the eTMF to be very ready to use, very easy to use, to have our users actually participate. It needs to be pre-validated, meaning it is ready to meet the requirements of an automated system per the regulatory requirements. And that's the eighth item, completely compliant, that it has version control, tracking of every action, an audit trail, all the things you need to operate any system in compliance with the requirements. It needs to be able to do, as I put in my picture, connect the stakeholders, including the site, to get documents from the site, not have the documents maintain a binder separately, but it is an integrated component. And it needs to have the ability to easily import and export and archive items, because we have regulatory requirements for that as well, to keep studies for a certain amount of time. So very quickly, I wanted you to know these are the things that make a fourth generation eTMF the kind that maintains inspection readiness. And in a moment, we'll be looking at a demo for that. And I'll be asking my colleague, Rob, to help me with that. Now, as he gets ready, and we can switch the screen to him at any time, I'm going to introduce a little bit of this demonstration. Our purpose today is to show you an example of a modern eTMF, fourth generation eTMF. Now, of course, I know it very well because it's my company's Agatha, and we are partners with Arithmos to bring this to customers. And what you're going to see is a cloud-based system, and we're going to do a demo in 4 sections. And the first section is just asking Rob to log in and show you around. Because it's cloud-based, all you need is a browser. But I want you to have a sense of how it looks and feels. Now, the one thing I want you to know is this is a study already underway, just barely underway. But what happened before Rob started is a new TMF was created for a study. We call it AGT, I believe, AGT-001. And that agovascular study was pre-populated with all the expected documents. So what you're going to see are what we call placeholders. And those placeholders are saying there should be a document here. And then we go through the process of replacing the document, replacing the placeholders with the document. So Rob, I'm going to let you pick up the narration right there, and then I'll pop in a couple of times as you go. You have about about 15 minutes for this, Rob. So we have plenty of time, I think. Go ahead.
Thanks, Ken. So logging into Agatha is as easy as entering a URL into your browser on your PC, tablet, or cellular phone. Once you log in, you're taken to the dashboard. The first time any user logs into our system, you're going to get displayed tips and tricks to discover the application, and you can navigate through that and learn about the different areas of Agatha. On the dashboard, what you see on my screen right now, across the top here, we have workspaces or studies. Each tile here is a TMF study, an investigator site file, or another application of Agatha like SOP or QMS and Kappa. Below the workspaces are tasks. These tasks are reviews, approvals, or trainings that may be assigned to you throughout any of the workspaces that you have access to. On the left here, we have our navigation bar. We're currently at the dashboard, and below that is another area for tasks. All tasks within Agatha are accompanied by an email, as well as representation here in the system. You can actually click on the task link, be taken to your task inbox, and search and filter that task list as you see fit. And you can actually click here and complete a task that may be assigned to you right here on the right. Below that are organization settings, which administrators have access to add users, deactivate users, or create new clinical studies. Below that are workspaces. Again, you can access them this way or from the dashboard. Below that is our help. So here you have ways to reach Agatha. You can restart that tour at any time and find out information about the product as well. We also support several languages. So here, if you want to use the user interface in a different language, you can select that language. And then finally, the navigation bar on the left, it may automatically come collapsed or expanded depending on your screen resolution, but you have the ability to manually expand and collapse that navigation bar as well. So I'm going to go ahead and navigate back to the dashboard and get into our AGT-001 trial master file. When I enter that trial master file, I'm taken to a default view that we have set up out of the box, which is the folder view. Here, everything is organized into the typical trial country site folder structure that you're used to with the TMF reference model. So here, as I expand the folder structure, we have our zones and sections recommended by that model. Again, at the top here, these are called views. They're different ways of seeing your documents. And these are currently our out-of-the-box views. However, an administrator can add additional views to the system to see documents in the way that makes sense for your business or study. So if I switch over to the list view here, it shows all our items outside of a folder structure. We have grouping, so you can group items and select a certain status to see what's missing, what's final, excused, draft in the different states. Within these views, you can also search. So if you want to search a term such as audit, it's going to return all the results of properties as well as content of files that have that audit term in it for Word and PDF. Beyond the search capabilities, you can also apply filters. So any property that's captured in the system, you can apply a filter. So if you wanted to see all documents for a certain country, a certain site, you can add that filter and apply that, and the results will return as well. You can also ascend or descend any property in the system for your view. And then over here under the More button, you can export any view you have live on your screen to Excel for viewing outside the system. We also have the missing view, which shows all missing documents. So those are the placeholders that are expected documents for your study, but not yet fulfilled. Later on, I'll talk about the QC views once we get creating some documents.
So Rob, is that a good place for me to interrupt and take us to the next section?
Yes, please.
So when I started, I talked about the TMF as a set of files in file cabinets. And what Rob has shown so far is an image of that. What Rob's shown is this is the place for the documents. It is the file cabinet, including very organized files, organized as folders, in a tree that is in the reference model structure. So exactly what you would expect. But as they say in an infomercial, as we call them in the United States, but wait, there's more, because that's just the storage. What about an eTMF as a process hub? What about it as a place to bring documents into, create new documents, review and approve them? So what I'm asking Rob to do next is to show you two scenarios. One is a very simple scenario. You as a CRA have a document, it's on your desktop, maybe it was mailed to you, and it's final. You just want to put it in the TMF. It's just final, ready to go. We do that through a drag and drop model that Rob will show you. But then he's going to show you our second model, which is a complete create a new document in the TMF. Create a document from draft, have it go through a review, and have it go through an approval. So a complete workflow from beginning to end. So Rob, can you show us those two scenarios?
Yes, so now I'm back in the folder view. So I'm going to go ahead and navigate to the trial level folder, zone 1 and section 1 trial oversight, because I'm going to create a debarment statement that I received and need to upload as a final document to the system. So here in this view, you see documents with different statuses, items with missing. These are our placeholders, so they're the expected documents not yet fulfilled to the study. So I'll go ahead and click on that placeholder. It brings me to a creation screen where I can drag and drop my file. I can browse through the file system to it and upload it, and also do up to 30 files at a time. So I'll go ahead, select my debarment statement here, and drag it into the window. As that file uploads, you see I'm displayed the document properties. One thing you might notice is a name field isn't here. That's because out of the box, Agatha uses auto naming. So we use a convention that you may decide. So it could include the artifact name, a document version, a date, any property that's captured, or any information the system knows about it could be leveraged in the auto naming convention, which promotes consistent naming among your files, and your users don't have to worry about it. We also could display name here and allow users to manually type in a name as they upload the file. Any property here that is noted with a red asterisk, that's a required field and must be filled in before the system will allow us to create the document. Owner is going to default to the logged in user. However, if you're uploading on behalf of another owner, you can select their name here as well. Status, we allow draft and final out of the box. This can be customized. And the first scenario that Ken asked me to show is uploading a document directly to final. I'll go ahead and select the document date here and specify a version. Once I fill that in, I'll go ahead, click create, and we're going to see that the system is going to file that document in the correct folder path and location, and that it's brought that document in with that final status. And you notice the auto naming leverages the artifact name, the document version, and the document date. So this is the quick way to bring in a document into Agatha that needs no reviews, approvals, or authoring. So the next scenario, I'm going to leverage a trial management plan. So again, I'm going to locate the placeholder, click on it, and browse to my file or drag and drop it. So when I do that, we again see the properties. This time, I'm going to leave the status as draft, and then we're going to be able to run that document through its flow within Agatha. So once I've clicked create here, again, that document is filed in the correct location, and now it's brought in with a draft status, and I have the ability to actually edit that document in the system. So I can click on it, open, and edit with Office. This requires me to have Office installed on my PC or device that I'm using, and then I can go ahead and make edits to that file once it has opened up. So here, I can add any information I need to. And once I'm done, I simply exit out of the application and save my changes. Everything is done directly in Agatha. There's no local copies of the file brought down onto my PC or device. And once I'm done, I want to make my changes available to everyone, so I check it back in. Once that document is authored, you can then initiate the flows in Agatha. So I'll access the menu, and under Lifecycle, I'll see the options that are available to me for that document. So I can go ahead and send it to review or send it directly for approval signatures. So I'll click Send to Review, and that brings up our out-of-the-box review workflow. These flows are fully customizable to your specific business process. So here you see I'm going to send the original document out, and I'm going to leverage our online edition. So I'll show you what that looks like next. And for demo purposes, I'll just assign it to myself. I enter a due date. So this due date helps prioritize tasks on the user's task list. And we can also trigger reminders off of that. And then below that, on all our workflows, we have a comments box where you can specify instructions to the reviewer. Once I'm ready, I click Start Review, and the system's going to start processing that document. So at this time, I'm receiving an email notification that I have a review task, as well as a notification in the system to review that document. So if I navigate over back to the tasks view, we're going to see that I have a review for that trial management plan right here. I can see all the details that were provided to me and actually click on the task and complete the review. So right here, the properties are displayed. I can go ahead and make sure everything is correct there. And I can also click on Preview and see that file directly in the browser. Once I've reviewed the content of the file, I can decide if I need to make edits to it or if I'm happy with it as it is. If I need to make edits, I'll come over here and select the appropriate option. So this time I'm going to edit online. This means that I don't need to have any third-party software on my PC or device, and the document is actually going to open in the browser in Agatha.
A little slow today, Rob.
It is. Okay, so now as the file opens, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I interrupt you. I was going to say it's probably because we have so much going on with webinar traffic at the same time. Go ahead.
So as you see, the document has opened up in the browser in a Word type setting. So here I have all the functionalities that are available in Word. You notice track changes has automatically been enabled. So I can add content and make edits to that file. The nice thing about Edit Online is you can have multiple users in the document at the same time making edits, and everyone's going to see what's being done by each other in real time. Once all the changes have been made, I simply close out of that file. You're going to be taken back to your task. You're going to see that the document has been modified, And once you've set that, you'll click review right here. You can enter any comments, such as you edited a certain section, and then click review. Once you click review, it'll prompt you whether you want to check that document in, and then that task is removed from your task list. Since I was the only reviewer of that document review workflow is now complete, and that document can be pushed further along in the system. At this point, the author could go in, reconcile the changes, and once done, they'll go back and look at the lifecycle options and send that document for approval. So just like review, we have an approval workflow screen.
I'm sorry, Rob. For today, we're not going to go through the full approval if that's okay. I'm just watching the clock, and I do want you to show one more thing. I don't think it will mess you up too much if I now ask you to abandon that approval task and perhaps using other documents. Just show that everything is being tracked, show that every action, because this is a process hub, is being documented through audit trails, e-signatures, and versions. Can you do that for us?
Sure, so I'll use this trial status report here, and you see when I click on it, a document panel has opened up on the right. I can expand that panel so you can see it more easily, and it shows different things that I have access to based on my permissions. So you see we have a workflow history here that tracks all the workflows that have been run on it. You can expand the details, see who's acted on it at what point. We also have a version history that shows every change that has been made to a document from version to version. You can open it up and it'll show you specifically what's been modified. And then of course we have an EMA and FDA compliant audit trail that tracks everything that's happened to our files from inception, including approvals, reviews, who's viewed the document. You also have the ability to filter on that audit trail as well.
Thank you very much. We're going to allow the screen to go back, and thank you, Rob. And let me just do this summary statement. So because the TMF as an eTMF can be a process hub, a collaboration hub, we need to be inspection ready at all times and keep track of everything that happened. My metaphor was an eTMF is like a robot. It's doing tasks, it's watching tasks, and it's recording everything it does. And that's what creates inspection readiness. When an inspector can come in, have their own view, an inspector role in an eTMF and see what Rob just showed, all the documents, what's missing, what's not missing, every history of every document, it makes for a very pleasant, very short inspection. And instead of being a scary appearance at the window in the night, is in the light of day, wonderful experience. And we've had many customers go through that kind of inspection. So that's connecting the dots here, that an inspection readiness model creates a need for different kinds of capabilities. And Agatha has one example. I'm going to stop speaking now and be done with my portion and turn it back to Antonello and our producers for any questions that came in.
Yes, thanks, Ken. So thanks, Ken. Robert, I believe we provided a good picture of the situation. Now I think it's time for the question and the answer side. So
thank you, Antonello. I wish to thank Ken, Robert, and Antonello for this very interesting presentation. We have some minutes and we can go ahead and answer a couple of questions raised by our attendees. Before dedicated to these last minutes to the questions raised in the toolbar, I ask you a question we received during the registration. So the first question is inspection readiness when the eTMF is managed by the CRO during the study and transferred to sponsor after completion. What is your opinion about it?
Well, I believe the health authorities' guidelines are very clear on this matter. In sense, the sponsor remain always the responsible for the study eTMF, even if he decide to delegate the CRO for some document management. At the same time, if documented, if behind that we have a strong contract, well-defined contract with the CRO, for many documents, this responsibility can be given to the CRO, but it remains for the essential document, for example, the responsibility of the sponsor, no, to ensure the inspection readiness. So that's from a formal point of view. So I mean, a contract can help, but at the end of the day, is a collaboration, no, between the CRO and the sponsor to ensure the inspection readiness, even if the TMF is managed by the CRO during the trial. So it's trivial to say that the sponsor must have full access to the eTMF. They must collaborate to get analysis indicators about the completeness of the TMF and document. But at the same time, it's important for the CRO, for the sponsor, sorry, to organize also some regular audit to this eTMF managed by the CRO, and we can have different approaches to this audit. The first one that I think that I have in mind is to create a sort of randomized sample of documents where you can check the status of certain documents and provide to each artifact, to each document, some weight, risk, make a risk analysis. So for an essential document like protocol, you perform 100% of the quality check. For correspondence, email, not necessarily you have to do the same. Another story is the completion of the TMF at the end of the study, when you have to consider that the CRO could not maintain this eTMF on their side. You have to consider the transfer of this eTMF from the CRO to the sponsor. This is a long discussion, but to be quick, I would say that even in this case, you need to clearly define a contract with the CRO in order to ensure that the package, the full TMF, is exported in a validated package in order to be imported, transferred to the sponsor in the appropriate way.
Thank you, Antonello. The next question is how do investigator site file and TMF integrate in an eTMF?
So this is a wonderful area, and we would take a whole another hour to talk about it. I'll give you a very short answer though. By the definition of what is in an eTMF, or I'm sorry, a TMF, based on the DIA reference model, there are things that come from the sites, the investigator site file or ISF. Now, there's very traditional models of collecting those. Probably the most obvious is email. So there's lots of ways to get things from sites to the TMF. But because they're outside of the eTMF, they are of very low quality. Some of them are not even meeting regulatory requirements. So in a modern decentralized trial, the sites are providing their content, their files, into a workspace in the cloud. And the sponsor or CRO is looking and doing their inspections, their monitoring of those files, and pulling them into the TMF. So the short answer is a modern eTMF has the ability to also have sites participate in that process. Now, how that works is of great detail. We don't let them go into the whole TMF. They have their own subspaces, etc. But as I said, that's a big discussion. So really, there's two ways that sites can participate. They can either send, fax, email content for a person to put it into the TMF, or you can have a TMF system that has the allocation and the functionality for sites to participate. That's part of a 4th generation eTMF, and a great follow-on webinar. Stephanie, I would love to do that one with Antonella.
Thank you, Ken.
Yes.
Well, we have a last question, just a pair of minutes. Inspection readiness also consists of QC. Could you detail that aspect?
Well, not. It's also another question that takes a long time. A QC is based on standard checks, and at the same time specific checks depending on the study phase or study treated disease. The check of the QC, check, the quality control check that should be applied on an eTMF, for sure, it should be defined by a checklist predefined and agree with the CRO if we are working with the CRO prior to start the study, or internally if the eTMF is managed internally by the CRO. We have basically 3 factors that should be considered in the QC checklist. We have the consideration on the missing documents, so the verification of the missing documents. We have the timeless, so the consideration about the timing, so the delay in providing the right document in the right place in the right time. And the last but not least is the content of each document. That is, of course, the most critical part of QC. These 3 steps should be conducted, as I already suggested at the beginning during my first answer, in using a strategic methodology. So you have but that's just an example. So you have to consider to divide the documents in what is essential, what is considered essential, and what is not. And on these 2 groups of documents, approach with a risk assessment and analyzing randomly documents and consider the percentage of issues that you can find in this review. Depending on the weight, the criticality, importance weight that you give to each type of document, you can arrive to define a sort of risk assessment and then percentage that allow you to consider this TMF as good enough, ready enough for an inspection, or not at all. If it's not at all, it's clear that you have no alternatives. The outcome that you see is a full review of the entire eTMF.
Just one note to add that those of you who have been with us throughout this event know that I reduced or truncated Rob's demo in the interest of time. One of the things that I took out from him showing was within an eTMF, how the QC function can be executed and tracked. So there is functionality in a modern eTMF, such as this one, that does track QA activities. You just didn't get to see it today.
Sure.
But everything else, Antonello, you said, we completely agree with and understand.
Yeah,
I'm all
sure.
set. Thank you.
But you know, I presented my answer from a human process point of view. It's evident that this process can benefit from an information system, from an eTMF, because of automation, fully or partial automation of such checks, and because of the possibility to repeat the same series of checks several times during the trial, which is quite impossible if you have to do everything manually using humans.
Thank you both. I wish to thank everyone who has participated in today's webinar and thank our speakers. We really care about your opinions, so please complete the short poll that you will receive in the follow-up email. If you have additional questions, you can contact us at the email address that you can see on the next slide, please. And for a free assessment, you can reach our business development manager, Davide Tarantola. Next week, we will also receive an email with a link to view a recording of today's webinar. So I really thank you, all of you, and have a good afternoon. Thank you.